introduction, my name is Austin Dressman. I'm the Community Events Manager here at Engaging Networks. We're really excited to hear from Christine Ward and Max Zimmer. Christine's the digital content strategist at Corner Shop Creative, and Max is the web developer at Corner Shop Creative. And I can attest to the fact that Corner Shop knows what they're talking about with this and a lot of all the other very, very behind the scenes tech stuff, because they have helped me actually directly on occasion. So, and other of us here at Engaging Networks. So, Christine and Max, I will pass the baton off to you.
All right, thank you. So today we're talking about Google Analytics 4 and engaging networks, what you need to know. So we'll just do some quick introductions first. I'm Christine Ward. I'm a digital content strategist at Corner Shop Creative, like Austin just mentioned. So I work a lot in Google Analytics 4, just kind of parsing through all of the different data that's available in there to make optimization recommendations for different nonprofit websites. And I will let Max introduce himself.
Thank you. So I'm Max Zimmer. I'm a web developer on the digital strategy team at Corner Shop. I do a lot of stuff with Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager. I'm one of those weirdos who kind of likes data and math and things, so that's where I come in. And then I'll give a little brief introduction for Corner Shop. We're a digital marketing company that supports nonprofits with website design and development. We also do WordPress maintenance and support, and we optimize your website with SEO, ads, and other marketing strategies, including Google Analytics.
All right, so just a brief overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to briefly cover the difference between Universal Analytics and GA4, why it's important to track conversions on your website, how to set up your GA4 properly, user paths in Google Analytics 4, how to integrate tracking on Engaging Networks domains, and how to set up custom tracking for Engaging Networks forms, and just a few other best practices kind of baked in. So the difference between Universal Analytics and Google Analytics 4. Universal Analytics was based on sessions and page views, whereas GA4 is based on events and parameters. But both methods can collect and tally data. It's just that the output in a report will likely look a little different for you. Since the two models are fundamentally different, you may also notice a few discrepancies between the numbers you see in Universal Analytics and those you see in GA4, if you did have them both running at the same time, even if both were tracking correctly. So everything in Google Analytics 4 is an event. So a page view is an event, a session start is an event, a click, a file download, a scroll. All of these different occurrences are tracked out of the box as events in GA4. The new interface will take some getting used to, but again, as long as your property is set up correctly, which Max will cover in just a bit, everything that you need to know is available in GA4. And there's actually a lot more data available than you previously had access to in Universal Analytics. But the one thing that has gone away that I know a lot of marketers are a little sad about is the bounce rate metric. So now, rather than measuring the success of the page by whether or not a user visits another page, GA4 uses what they call engaged sessions to take into account a variety of different factors for that same success. So in an engaged session, it has to last for longer than 10 seconds, have one or more conversion events, or have two or more page or screen views there. And I just wanted to demonstrate a little bit of that user interface difference. We can take a look at the All Pages report in Universal Analytics and the comparable Pages and Screens report in GA4. You can see that Universal Analytics only reports on page views, whereas in GA4, you can see screen views. So that is app screens as well as page views. So all of that data is combined in GA4. But this just demonstrates that similar data is available, but it looks a little bit different in the reporting tools. All right, so the importance of setting up conversion tracking. It might feel a little bit creepy, but the data that you are collecting and using is all aggregated together and it's not tied to a single user. And you cannot measure the success of your digital marketing and fundraising efforts without conversion tracking. It is just infinitely more difficult to plan a campaign if you don't know what's actually working for your audience and what's not. So with data around your conversions, you can optimize your website and your marketing efforts to increase conversions. You can know when your conversions decrease and make adjustments accordingly to limit the damage there. Conversion tracking can really affect just about everything that you do as a marketer or a fundraiser. So while GA4 does track many actions right out of the box, you will need to set up custom events or work through some additional configuration to track certain actions in Google Analytics 4. So Max will talk more about this in just a few minutes, but that includes events that happen on Engaging Networks pages and forms. So even if you have all the actions you'd like to track set up as events in your GA4 account, there is one extra step to actually mark those different events as a conversion. So I really recommend selecting those most important goals, the donations, volunteer signups, event registrations, email signups, all of those most important actions that you want visitors to take on your website, actually taking the extra step to mark those as conversions. By doing this, you can set those most important actions kind of above all of the other events on your website and gain some additional reporting features there. So you could see conversion rates and counts on reports in the acquisition, engagement, and advertising sections on Google Analytics 4. And it's especially important if your organization is using Google Ads. You're not able to import events into ads, but you can import conversions. And it enables you to set your bid strategy in Google Ads to kind of maximize those specific conversions so that your ads will appear to people who are more likely to take those really important actions on your website.
All right. So before we actually get started with tracking, we want to make sure that your GA4 property is properly configured. I was almost going to stumble over that proper property. So with enhanced measurements, as Christine mentioned, all of those events that are tracked out of the box are called enhanced measurements in GA4. These enable the content interaction measurements through event options in Google Analytics interfaces. This requires no code changes. Activating these options for a web data stream, which would be like your website, your domain has its own little data stream. That immediately triggers event transmissions via your Google Analytics tag. And I know that sounds really complicated. I promise I will describe that a little in a little more detail. Cross-domain tracking is another fun little term that was introduced in GA4, which basically means that you're going to be tracking any domains. You specify the domains that you're going to be tracking. So you would have your top-level domain, your main website, but then you might also have a subdomain that you use, for example, in Engaging Networks that you also want to track. And this allows Google to set first-party cookies so that it can make sure that it's tracking those people correctly across those different environments. It ensures that, cross-domain tracking ensures that visitors are only tracked once, and that allows for more accurate data as the user betweens those multiple domains. And since Google considers subdomains like give.yoursite.org, those are considered their own domain. So cross-domain tracking enables you to visualize that full user journey from your main website to your Engaging Networks pages, and also any other websites you might control. So by default, GA4 sets data retention to just 2 months, which isn't very long if you want to have like historical data to look back on. So while this doesn't affect your aggregated data that is shown in reports, because those are just forever, it does limit the amount of data that you can use in what are called explorations, which are basically miniature reports that you can configure and use to adapt your data into different visualizations so that you can use those for informed strategies. The only other option to 2 months is actually 14 months. So you only get 2 or 14. Why those numbers, I'm not really sure. And so we recommend that you change the setting right from the get-go, so that you're always able to use that long-term data in those explorations.
So I can talk quickly about user paths in GA4, which is a path exploration, one of the types of explorations that Max just was talking about. So these allow you to select a starting or an ending point, and see where users went and what they did afterward or leading up to that point. So you might create a path exploration that starts with the event session start to see kind of the progression of pages that users visit once they land on your site, or the events that they take after their session starts. But in looking at donations specifically, it can be really valuable to set up a reverse path exploration where the endpoint is a donation event. So this will allow you to see all of the pages or events that lead up to these successful donations. So then you could potentially recreate those paths for more potential donors to find that same success and give. Or you might see pages that you thought were really high value pages for donors that are missing from that path. So then you would know, oh, I need to make updates to this page so that donors can access it more easily. For example, you might see that your homepage is missing from the donation path exploration, and take a look at the page and see that your donate call to action is all the way at the very bottom, a few scrolls deep. And just by moving that call to action up on the page, you can help bring it into the donation path and create your ideal journey for donors. So this example here shows the events leading up to a donation page view in Engaging Networks. But you can easily kind of select pages from these different steps so that you can see the progression of pages or page paths, which the page paths would include query strings as well.
So before we start talking about how to implement and set up these strategies, let's talk about one little tiny hole in this whole thing, which is when tracking doesn't work. And you might be asking yourself, but why? So this really gets into the accuracy of data, right? Sometimes different sources will show different numbers, and you're not really sure what would be going on. Those different sources might be like a Facebook pixel or another social media pixel. You might have different trackers that are also installed and they're showing different numbers. These can really get interrupted by different browsers, different stacks, and also ad blockers. The primary reasons why something won't be tracked is because first, maybe the visitor just doesn't have JavaScript enabled. While this is a somewhat rare case, because most browsers have JavaScript, there are people who might be using accessibility tools like screen readers where JavaScript is disabled. There's also the possibility that a visitor might have an ad blocker installed. And ad blockers have gotten pretty good at saying, hey, that's a product that might be tracking an IP address, so I'm just going to block it. So different ad blockers will start getting in the way of those. And then there's also that maybe the visitor has blocked cookies entirely. Cookies are relied on for factors like this so that you can see how a user persists through the entire funnel. And really, there's nothing that we can do about it. It's up to the user what resources and tools they use to actually visit your pages. And so the best that you can do is just have tracking enabled so you can get the best possible view of your data that you can. So with that out of the way, let's talk about some installation methods. So Google Analytics is really just a little JavaScript snippet that is one or two lines of code that you can just throw into your website. And while that sounds easy, there's a little more to it than that. There are two primary methods for installing a Google Analytics tag. The first one is just the default Google tag, as Google calls it, which is a little JavaScript called gtag.js. This is the default for most of Google's products nowadays. I think they all use gtag.js. That includes Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, Google Ads, and other tools that they provide as well. This is pretty basic. It allows us to add just those enhanced measurements that come with GA4 out of the box, as we mentioned earlier. Those are things like page views, form starts, clicks. But this is, as I said, pretty basic. So if we want to have a more robust method for installing this, and we might also want to integrate our data with other tools, then we can use Google Tag Manager, which allows us to install these tags and interact with that data. It also allows you to share that data with other tracking resources like social media, ads remarketing, and external CRM. It also makes it easier to create custom events with custom properties for collection in GA4. A custom event might be like, hey, there's this extra button that we have off to the side that shows other ways to donate. And you might have like a little drop down or an accordion over there, and you want to track how many people actually click that thing. And that would be a good use case for creating your own little custom event that you can then track through GTM and have that data pass into GA4. Regarding e-commerce tracking, which is what we're here to talk about, it's e-commerce or conversion tracking. They're kind of semantically the same. This is this is when we recommend to our clients that we use GTM, because if there is anything that we want to scale later on, GTM allows us to do that much easier. I also want to mention just really quickly that we want to be aware of duplicate data. So Google Tag Manager, while it does really good at taking these configuration tags from GA4 and getting everything going, there are occasions where you want to do some debugging towards the end of your installation so that you can make sure that you're not receiving duplicate data. Google Analytics by default will track those things that are in enhanced measurements. Google Tag Manager will also try to pass things, but not duplicate. But sometimes technology isn't as smart as we are. So we need to just make sure that it is doing what we want it to do. So here's some fun code stuff. The implementation strategy for either of these, if you're comfortable with copy and paste, and you have someone who has given you the code to do so, then by all means, you can go into an Engaging Networks template and paste it into your head, and then good. But this will require some JavaScript understanding. And so a JavaScript developer like myself or another one at Cornershop will be able to help you with this. The GTAG implementation, as I mentioned, is going to follow a very similar process for this, but I'm going to be from this screenshot that's on the slide. This is actually a Google Tag Manager implementation, which uses the data layer, which is similar to GTAG, but performs a little differently. The script should be added in, typically should be added on a template in Engaging Networks. And that is because we are going to be taking advantage of some things like replacements in Engaging Networks, where they take something like a page title and just automatically replace it. And by having the scripts on template, that allows those the native functionality of Engaging Networks to actually make those replacements happen, so we can use that data. And they're called page tags, not replacements. And so let's talk a little bit about what we actually want to track. Well, in this little screenshot of the code, you can see at the top the blue word event. This indicates that it is a purchase, but there are lots of e-commerce events that Google Analytics understands out of the box. It doesn't actually track any of them out of the box. You have to tell it, hey, we're on an e-commerce page. This is the item details and the purchase details, like how much is actually being transmitted through the transaction. Was there any coupon codes that should be known about? If there are any item categories, then you can add those there as well. Something that we often do is that for item categories and using those types of replacements that I mentioned, we'll add in perhaps the campaign ID from Engaging Networks. We can also add in other data that comes in from the fields. But I do also want to mention, and I'm probably going to mention this a couple of times, don't add user data because we don't want to track someone with identifying information. We will only want to limit it to non-identifying information. You don't want to be going through your Google Analytics and see a Jane Doe entry because Jane Doe probably hasn't given you permission to have her data inside of your Google Analytics property. And so what to track, we can do things like begin a checkout. This is one that I typically use for when someone has just started filling in a form. There's also items like add payment info, where someone has just entered, well, their payment info. And then, of course, a purchase event is the one that we're most interested in. This would be, while they call it purchase, and I know that we're doing donations, purchase is the event that we would use, and we would pass that item information through there. And there are some other ones as well. There's a form start. So if you want to know when someone actually started filling in your form, you can totally do that. That is actually an out of the box one. Form start and form submit will be tracked automatically. Form submit, of course, if someone clicks the submit button and the form is successfully processed. And then there are also some further ancillary ones like share. If you have share buttons on your donation pages, you can use that. If you're doing a newsletter and it's not necessarily a donation page, you can see that someone is signing up. And if you have multiple campaigns on the same page and you have some cart function or you have an e-commerce store elsewhere, you can also use add to cart and some of the other options that are available. And so this is an example of what a funnel exploration looks like. Christine was talking about a path and reverse path exploration. This is another option that you can find in a GA4 exploration. This funnel is pretty awesome. You can tell it to look at specific data, and when you actually scroll down past this one, this diagram, it will show you more information about those different steps. And so in this example, we're kind of using those some of those events that I had mentioned. So the first one is the visitor loads the page. We often implement a custom event here where someone loads an Engaging Networks donation page, and that just makes it easier to find that. It's kind of like a snapshot in time or a checkpoint where this is where someone actually entered the page itself. From there, we started looking at, okay, well, did they start the form after visiting? Did they enter their contact info after that? What about billing info? What about payment info? And then was the purchase finalized and validated? And so you can see that here that there's a range of drop-offs. And so this funnel allows us to say, okay, well, why are we only getting this? And then we can implement other tools to actually determine the whys behind the data. So a little bit more code. I hope no one's running away yet. So in engaging networks, the primary thing, and I honestly, in any system with Google Analytics, you're going to want to keep your strategy simple. You want to start off by identifying the key questions that you have about your visitors and how they interact with your websites or your donation forms or your newsletter forms. And then you can start tracking there. The goal in the beginning is never to get all of the information in the exact way that you want it. It's to start off somewhere so that you can then build on your learning from your data. Out of the dozens of event options, you really only need a few, which are what I showed off in the last couple of slides with those funnels. There are lots of other events out there that are for like apps or for gaming that you're just not going to need. So while it seems overwhelming, you really only need to learn about 5 of these. There is so our recommendation is typically to install that code inside of your template. Don't use a third-party script that is being pulled in externally because then those replacements won't work. The replacements can't actually go into a file and make those replacements happen. They have to happen on page. Of course, you can always add these tracking codes in a single page in engaging networks through a code block. But that would be a very specific use case. Like I only want to track this page, just this one. And then you could definitely do that. You can also, if you're a little more familiar with code, you can use regular expressions to within those templates to say, I only want this script to work on donation pages, for example, or petition pages if you're tracking something else. It is also possible to add a JavaScript object to your pages called page.json. This is from Engaging Networks, and we are very pleased to have this because it allows us to interact with that data in a JavaScript object so that we can use it within our scripts and pass that data to Google Analytics 4. On the right in this slide, you'll see an example of what page.json might look like. In this example, you see the page name, and I believe that's the name that is actually shown in Engaging Networks, so that if you use the search in the admin, you can actually find the page. As we all know, sometimes the title tag is a little different than what we call it internally. So this makes it really helpful from your Google Analytics. You can see that page is performing and then access it in Engaging Networks. Additionally, you can see that there are page counters. So if you want to know which page someone ended on in a funnel or dropped off at, then you can do that. You can also see the amount. I don't know why this is a 3, but you're probably getting more than $3, hopefully for your donations. You can also see the campaign IDs, payment types. And one thing that you'll notice here is that there is no identifying user information. We're not tracking Jane through her entire funnel. We're tracking a visitor, an anonymous visitor, through their funnel journey.
All right. We also just wanted to cover a few best practices and kind of cool things that you can do in Google Analytics 4. So this first bullet there is you can customize those kind of out-of-the-box reports that are available in GA4 and actually save those custom versions so that you can access that same data in the future. So for example, you might find yourself kind of constantly updating the traffic acquisition report to show your campaigns instead of the default which is the default channel groupings. You can save that version of the report for easy access when it's time to review the results of your next campaign. The ad comparison option is another fun one that I like to use. It allows you to compare different audiences. So you might look at the Pages and Screens report, which lists all of your most popular pages, and kind of see the differences between all users to your website and users who viewed a donate page during their session. And then the ad filter option is a little similar to that. It allows you to kind of dig deeper into data and get more specific, filtering data by dimension to look at things like users who landed on a specific page or took a specific action on your website. And then you always want to use good naming conventions for your conversion events from the start. You're not able to change them once you create them, unfortunately. So you want to make sure that whatever you name your conversion event, you know what it is, and everyone on your team knows what it is, so that everyone is able to actually understand the data and what actions users are taking on your website.
Yeah, that's really important. Self-documenting naming conventions is what I like to use as well. I did want to mention really quickly, or I should say re-mention the 14-month data retention. This is something that is very often glossed over when installing and setting up Google Analytics. You do not want to forget this step just because you want to have long-term data to help improve your informed decisions over time. And also, once again, do not send identifying user information like email addresses or names, and especially not billing information. And don't do it through any means. Sometimes, if you want to pass from one form to another, you would use something called query parameters, which are those little things that make URLs very scary. It has the question mark and some equal signs and some ampersands. And so sometimes you might pass the data through those. Do note that these are just like UTM parameters where Google will pick up on those. And so we want to be very careful about using those. And I think it is time for questions.
Yes, thank you both so much. That was super informative. Really excited to have the recording this too, to kind of refer back to some of these things, especially some of that code you mentioned and best practices there. We do have one that I'm going to go out of order a little bit, just because this one is relevant to what you just touched on. Is one from Anna. Says, where would we see the JS or the JSON code within Engaging Networks, not just in the inspect elements on the actual website?
Okay. So if I'm understanding correctly, you want to know where you can actually use page JSON? Is that correct? Within the Engaging Networks page?
Getting a yes on that clarification.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah, so page JSON is just a JavaScript object. So on the front end of your Engaging Networks pages, you will be able to go into your Inspect browser over to the console tab, which allows you to run JavaScript. And if you type in page JSON, the J is capitalized, then it will spit out that JavaScript object, and you can start using that data within your own JavaScript that you're queuing either within a page or a template.
Perfect. All right, we got a happy answer there. So perfect. And just a reminder to everybody, if you do want to ask something more specific and then do it anonymously, I guess if that comes up in any way, by all means, please feel free to change your chat to make it directly go to me or to the panelists, the host panelists, and I can see it that way too. If I can keep it anonymous if needed. I got another question here. Is there an easy way to know if my site is using Google Tags or Tag Manager? Good question.
So yes, kind of. Um, Google has a an option, and I will grab the link in just a second and drop that in chat. But they have something called Tag Assistant, and so if you were to go there and enter your site's domain, uh, your URL, then it would load it in a new container tab. And then if there's a green check mark, you're good to go. But with the Tag Assistant, you'll be able to see all of your Google properties. That's Google Tag Manager, Google Analytics. If you have Google Ads, and if these are all set up separately, then it will show all of them. And I will get that link for you right now.
Perfect. Thanks for that. Got a couple more questions that came in here. One, harkening back to the beginning of the presentation here from Abigail says, are social networks included in cross domains? For example, your Facebook page. Would that be a cross domain?
No. And that is only because you're not in control of Facebook. So you can only add the domains that you are actually tracking on. Like your Google Tag Manager or Google Analytics tags are not going to be on your Facebook page. So it's only I saw Mark's comment. But yeah, I hope that answers that question.
I can kind of build on that too. You are able to see data of people coming from Facebook to your website. So if you're posting links to your site in your Facebook posts, you'd be able to kind of track those visitors through your website once they land on your site.
Perfect. We have another one. How do we know how does somebody know if they have everything set up for the 14 months? I'm not sure exactly what that's in reference to because do
Yeah.
you? Sorry.
No problem. So this is regarding the data retention in the Google Analytics settings. So it's like its own little page in there. If you go to the Google Analytics admin, which will be a button in the bottom left of your Google Analytics dashboard, then you'll go to the data settings, and I believe there's a sub link in there called data retention. Go there, and there will be a little select box, and you can choose either 2 months or 14 months. And definitely choose 14 months.
Perfect. Got another question here. GA4 was set up by this person's predecessor, but I suspect not properly. I don't believe we are able to see a conversion form start to finish, where it's come from, I guess where that conversion form's come from. Is this something that is easy to rectify by a GA4 novice with enough reading of tutorials and whatnot, or is this better passing on to an agency to set up this specific issue here about conversion?
I would answer this is a complex answer. It also kind of depends on your level of expertise with JavaScript. So you can do some testing and sampling. I will say Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager both have debug modes. I think Google Tag Manager is called preview mode instead. And so if you're going to be tackling this yourself, definitely do it in that sort of an environment. Um, I could create a whole presentation about debugging and setting that stuff up. I would say do be careful because any data that you accidentally send will be saved in your Google Analytics. So if you're going to do testing and you don't want to mess with debug, you could also set up a new Google Analytics property that will just be your sandbox property, and then work with the data in that way. And once you start getting what you're expecting, then you can migrate that over to your actual property.
Perfect. And if I should mention, if anybody does need to ask further based on some of these answers, or just something else comes up after, be happy to pass that question on to the both of our Corner Shop friends here, and anybody else in their team. I'm sure they can answer that too. So feel free to come to me directly with that as well. And I got a few other chats over here, questions. This one's a little spicy. It's a bit of a party pooper question is what they preface it with, but why should we keep using GA4? They kind of talk about how the start of the presentation underscored the common wisdom that it's mystifying, frustrating, hard to learn. What's good about it? Why should we bother? Why not simply find a different solution for analytics? Making the case, putting you on the spot here.
Christine, do you want to? I'm happy to do it if you don't.
Yeah, there's just not a better tool that I've come across that allows you to get as much data or as intricate data as Google Analytics does. If you have another tool that you are using that you found you like better than Google Analytics, I'm all ears. But it's just been the industry standard for so long, and for good reason, because there's just so much that you can do with it.
Yeah, and keep in mind, like Google Analytics is built on, it has a long, long history, right? It actually started off as something called Urchin, and then Google bought it, and it's gone through several evolutions. I would say one of the big things that is awesome with GA4 is that they're actually going towards, they're moving in this direction where they're focusing more on mobile as well. So as web development changes and the standards change, they're changing right along with it, and throwing some more things in there that we can use in our toolbox. In terms of documentation and developing, they've got some pretty solid documentation, which I admit is sometimes hard to get through. But it's all there for learning. And then also, like with most free tools, there's a massive community surrounding GA4. If you have any questions about it, there's a strong likelihood that there will be somebody to help you. If you're asking whether like on a Stack Overflow situation, or you're hiring an agency to do it. And beyond that, I would say that it's just very good at integrating with other tools because it is free. And so that makes it a lot, very popular tool. And so you really can't find other analytics tools having those integrations natively with other applications.
I would only add to that, we use Plausible sometimes, but we use it with GA4 still, because we can't fully pull away from it. So I know that's another alternative, is to be able to maybe make some of the data visualization or gathering maybe a little easier using a separate product, but in some ways you still can't fully tear yourself away from that standard. So yeah, I think that was a great answer though. Got a question here that says something specific to their Engaging Networks account and GA4. They said they're seeing emails sent using Engaging Networks that are being classified as direct traffic. Is there a way for it to be classified as email as opposed to direct traffic? Putting you on the spot.
Okay.
You know the answer, we can come back to it and answer, or get somebody from our support team to send an answer.
I have a very quick answer. And it would be to investigate UTMs. The UTM parameters, like sources and mediums. If you're having links inside of your emails that just kind of go to a page, and yay, someone landed there, but you don't know where they're coming from, you're getting that direct traffic indicator, then using the UTM source, UTM medium, which are the two requirements, then you can start breaking that down. I know MailChimp sometimes adds its own layers of tags as well. That can get kind of confusing. But then Engaging Networks, you can also use query parameters for your emails.
Perfect. Got a few other questions here, and we will probably stop answering in about maybe 5 to 10 minutes, just to give everybody the time back, and then we can, if any questions still haven't been satisfied at that point, we can email you directly. But got one here that says, Should we just move everything to the survey side tracking for GA4? Would that give better results and flexibility? And will Engaging Networks be doing anything to make server-side tracking easier, given the move away from browser tracking and issues there? For example, iOS, etc. Once again, if there's anything EN related that we can address separately that you don't feel like you need to comment on that. But if you can't answer, go by all means.
Yeah. But this is a more developer-y question. Server-side tracking is, I mean, the main goal of it is to get around those but why bullets that I mentioned earlier about like someone having JavaScript disabled or an ad blocker. But once again, it's not going to be 100% accurate. I'm not sure off the top of my head exactly what the items are that get in the way in server side, but there are just other ones. Um, it's an attempt to alleviate that, but it's not nothing. There is no perfect solution. I'll say if you're really intense on getting as accurate of data as possible, server side might be something that you want to investigate. Do you know that then you have an extra layer that you're going to be dealing with, which is going to be well, you're going to have to use Google Tag Manager because Google Tag Manager is the one that has the server side, not GA4 by default. And so you have that extra layer, plus you have another server that you're going to be worrying about within your container or for your container. But GA4 or sorry, GTM is starting to kind of make strides on making that a little easier for people. I just haven't seen it in a very easy implementation.
Thanks for that. Got another one that's kind of related to GTM, what you just mentioned here, but a little different. You mentioned setting up a sandbox property for testing before implementing something. Would you need GTM to do something like that? Where is that property living and how is it connecting? Is it through something like GTM? So that they go on and say, I'm aware in the past, some people have said that they put multiple tracking code snippets on a site. So I'm wondering how you pass something to both the live and the sandbox test spaces with just one code.
Yeah. So with the testing environment, you have your okay, so you have your GA4 property, which is under your account, right? So your account can have multiple properties. So what I was saying with that was create a new property under your account, and it's just blank canvas for any of your testing. Within the code that GA4 gives you to insert onto your templates or your website pages, you'll see there's like a little piece there called, which will say G tag and then an ID. If you copy that, paste that, just that one little piece, and then add a different ID, it'll just track both at the same time, and send the same events to both at the same time. And you can also remove one, interchange them. The code for itself is identical between all of these properties. That ID is the only difference.
Perfect. Thanks for that. This is switching gears a little bit. Someone that says they have no experience with coding and they need to optimize their usage of GA4 though. So is there any beginner tutorials you'd recommend, any courses, things like that that you found to be helpful to those that you've worked with or that you yourself maybe have used when you first got started with all the new changes?
To be honest, I started with YouTube. There are a lot of people who talk about it. As I mentioned earlier, like since there's a huge community around Google products, there's a lot of content out there. I would say if you're going to go that free YouTube routes, make sure that you're, watching someone who actually has a reputation. So like do a little bit of research, check them out, like check out their website, check out like any reviews they might have. The number of views on a YouTube video isn't a strong indicator. So while we're talking about metrics, I might as well throw one in there. That someone it's just an indicator that someone's been around a long time, right? Not that they're actually knowledgeable. Definitely use up-to-date information as well. Google has its own documentation, so if you prefer to read, then you can visit those links as well.
Google also has courses through the partner organization called, I think, Skills Hop is the name. So you can take courses through that and actually get beginner certifications, and I think they go all the way up to advanced. So those are decent resources from Google if you're looking to start from the beginning.
Then I'll invite anybody if they have any quick, easy one that's not too deep divey that they want to drop in the chat that's helped them. By all means, drop it in there. Got just a few questions left here in our last few minutes. Is GA4 GDPR compatible?
I would say it's GDPR ready. So yes, it is compatible. You're going to have to figure out this is where you're going to definitely need a developer because you're probably going to have a consent banner. And so when someone makes their selections and their choices for what cookies they're allowing you to track, then something has to happen, right? So either GA4 is becomes active or it doesn't. And so that is actually more complicated than it might sound. Um, I think there are probably some out of the box solutions that would be no code solutions, but I'm not familiar with one. So yes is the answer.
Good to know. That's perfect. A different engaging network consultant said not to use GA4 standard transition, that you need to recreate everything from UA to GA4. Is that your recommendation as well?
It's funny. Christine and I were just dealing with this recently. So again, depends kind of. If you have a million conversions from UA, then maybe just let them come over. And if something is broken, then you can try to apply a fix. If you just have a few, then you might not even need them anymore. GA4 is actually kind of made some big strides so that some of those things that you would have to set up like for goals in UA, you don't have to set those up in GA4. It's really just a different process of getting that data out from what you have collected and finding different paths to that data as well. So yeah, I hate those it depends answers, but unfortunately that's one of them.
Perfect. No, that's good. That's good answers here to some very specific questions and some very high level questions as well. So I really appreciate your knowledge and expertise on this, the both of you here, Christine and Max. Like I said, though, if you do have questions that come up, please do feel free to reach out to me directly. Otherwise, thank you though so much for joining us. Thanks everyone. Appreciate it.